Thanks so much for joining me. And I wanted to talk a little bit today of how do we really lead change when we're in this fearful market. And I think it can be really challenging for us as leaders to understand how do we help to motivate our teams along with ourselves in a market where it feels like there's so much uncertainty and potentially instability that we're not really sure what to do. So if you join me live, I wanted to show up here. If you want to join me in the comments in the live stream, you can go ahead and scan the QR code and then I can see your comments come through. Otherwise, anything that comes in afterwards, I will make sure to respond to later should you have any questions. So I'll leave this up here for now. But I wanted to talk about this because I feel like it's incredibly important that we understand how we can be of best support to our teams. We are undergoing more pressure than ever before, and as leaders, it really is not only our responsibility to help individuals and teams with navigating these challenges, but it's incredibly imperative that we can find ways to support them and create systems and networks, internally within the organization and within our team itself to truly help to build confidence, motivation, and just an overall sense of achievement, especially if we are feeling like we are never accomplishing all of the things that we have on our endless to-do list and tasks and priorities. So if you are in the tech field at this moment, I'm sure that none of this is going to be a full-on surprise to you, but maybe it will validate maybe some of your feelings or your thoughts, as well as help to consider, how you're spending your time or your efforts as a leader within your organization and with your team. And so as someone had pointed out, even in the thread or the comments for this talk, it's not just teams who are feeling fearful and under incredible pressure, it's leaders. And all of the leaders that I work with are all feeling the same way. They're all grappling with this idea of how do they motivate their team when they're also facing burnout and stress and decision fatigue and anxiety. And that's why it makes it leading right now even more of a challenge because we're having to grapple with this inner conflict that we ourselves are feeling. And so even though we still have to prevail, and so hopefully this conversation is going to prove useful for you. And in no way do I suggest that leaders just pretend that everything is perfectly fine, and that we're not impacted by our own feelings, but rather that we have the transparency and the future forward thinking that at least enables our team to know that number one, we're in it with them, but we're also paving a way forward and we're looking to the future with greater hope. And so having a degree of transparency and solution oriented thinking is how you can start to help your team to combat maybe some of the emotions and the feelings that are coming up for them right now. And so what are some of the things, I did a kind of a quick analysis of what are some of the different things that teams and leaders are facing in the market as we know it. We're dealing with rapid innovation and competition. We're dealing with talent retention, restructuring, job shortages in certain cases. We're dealing with an increased pressure to really meet demand, and the time to market has really reduced. We're facing market volatility. There's great uncertainty, and there's also this uptick in how much we are producing. There's work-life boundaries and expectations, how our roles and our personal lives intertwine and what that's supposed to look like. There's also greater inclusion of diverse groups and thought models, how we as individuals and as teams can change our perceptions. There's team cohesion and safety, and not just only a local or even a remote environment, but a global environment. And there's also just the tech landscape in general, which has always been continuing to innovate, and the rapid pace of innovation and continues to increase. So we have cybersecurity, there's regulatory laws, and just new technology in general. And so when we couple all of this with a lack of overall focus and our mind's inability to really keep up with the pace of the meetings, the messages, the changes that are constantly happening, firefighting, and just this overall sense of urgency that we feel, we can really start to witness the rapid, degradation of our teams as individuals and on the whole, and the struggles that they're facing to just keep up the pace and truly know their place in relation to the organization as a whole. And the brain fog that I would say most of us are feeling is contributing to all of this. And so I do have several clients who have just expressed this overall concern of cognitive function, questioning whether they're neurodivergent when they never felt this way before or previously. And so while there is greater awareness into neurodivergence that's starting to take place, what's also occurring is that we have this really very real issue of how we're setting ourselves up for success. The cognitive load that we're facing, decision fatigue, overstimulation, and just constant triggers from Slack or Teams or email, text messaging. It's all vying for our attention and making decisions. And so the context switching that we're constantly having to do is all taking its toll on our mental state. I'm not going to go into all of that today or the neuroscience behind it. I've talked about, productivity tips and techniques and things that we can do to support ourselves. But I do want to make mention of it because it's incredibly real. And this is what's contributing to teams struggling to have that internal motivation, struggling to understand to a greater extent of how they fit in to this landscape and how do they keep innovating here as well. So it's really a perfect storm of confusion. The environmental conditions that we are currently operating under aren't truly conducive for creative thinking, thoughtful thinking, and really resonant communication as well. And that is, that's the trifecta for leadership development, right? Is critical thinking and creating innovative solutions and truly clear communication and negotiation of our ideas and how we strategize. So what do we really do? How do we help ourselves and our teams? Well, number one, we really have to be intentional and we have to be deliberate. We have to know how we're governing our time, our emotions, and our accountability to each other. We have to be continually repositioning and recommissioning our teams, which is incredibly critical to how we as a leader can show up and how we can really help with, the kind of the fury of the endless tasks, the priorities, and just the ultimate scattered output that I think a lot of teams are facing right now. As a former director of engineering, I used to also recognize that I think sometimes we think that if we give our teams more time, more space, that we're actually doing them a favor. And so I have a lot of leaders who say I've cut back on spending more time with my team or one-on-ones and things of that nature, just due to the sheer number of meetings that we have, giving them more time so that they can focus on their work and their priorities, an overall desire to not take up more time. When in effect, sometimes we're doing a disservice to our team because they feel as though maybe that they're not getting face time with their leaders. They're not as important or important enough for their leaders to make the time for them. And so there can be this miscommunication or misinterpretation of what some leaders feel like they're doing that is beneficial when the team takes it in another way. So if we can think about how we can solve this puzzle, number one, knowing that as a leader, you really can't do it all. You can't shoulder it all. You can't take all of the responsibility. And you might feel that you're helping your team, but you might also inadvertently be blocking your team. And really, how do you start to develop a sense of camaraderie? So I work with a lot of also special forces, transitioning special forces and operatives coming into the civilian market. But in our coaching, we're talking about the types of things that, loosely, they can't tell me everything, but that they loosely faced when in the service. And it's always amazing to me how much we can truly accomplish when we feel like we're in it together. And Simon Sinek talks about his work with the Navy SEALs quite often, and in his talks about finding your why. And it's really about finding this sense of purpose. But we can also get so much further when we feel like we're together and we're moving as a unit, even more so than as individuals who are even moving in the same direction, which is why teamwork is so prolific and so important. And so while we can really truly develop, degrees of stoicism, emotional intelligence, personal resilience, we can continually, improve and expand upon this as individuals. It's truly how we relate and engage with others that can set a true direction and change within our mental capacity and overall well-being, and how we really perceive our own limitations and move into flows of thinking and thought. So here are a few things I wanted to kind of highlight, three overarching ways that you can start to re-engage your team, help them to move through potentially some of the uncertainty, the fear, the doubt, the anxiety that they might be facing right now, and what it's looking like moving into Q3, Q4, and really Q1, because over the last 2 years, that's when we've experienced the greatest upheaval, at least, especially within the tech industry. And that is this looming thought that's coming, and it's pervasive. And so how do we start to help to ease some of that? And again, it really comes back into diving back into our teams, and how do we really help to drive the message home that we are there for them and that we care for them. And so really importantly, it is to set up those one-on-one meetings, those one-on-one conversations, which I know is incredibly challenging when we are pressed for time, when we have so many meetings on our calendars, when everybody is incredibly busy and the pressure is on. However, even if you can do more frequent, shorter meetings, that will overall make a much larger difference than if you're holding fewer meetings that are longer and they're spaced out with greater time. And so really think about how you can coach your team. So rather than using that time to do a status update, which I think a lot of leaders sometimes default to, use that time for that individual. So asking them questions, what challenges are they facing, how it ties back to their larger goals, how you as a leader can be of greater support. Also see about how you can get their buy-in. Ask for their ideas to better engage the team as a whole, and what level of effort they are willing to commit to or be accountable to, and where they see the team in relation to the organization as a whole. Continue to build that trust and establish that rapport. Make sure that you are speaking to their career goals, their trajectory, and how you, as a leader, are here to help support them on that path and that journey overall. And this can happen in several different conversations. It doesn't have to happen all in a single conversation. You can focus on different aspects of this. But again, if you're doing this more frequently, even over shorter time periods, it's going to make a huge impact in the way that you're establishing rapport and trust with individual members of your team, actively engaging them, and so that they feel like they have open pathways of communication with you rather than feeling like they don't want to bother you. So that's the opposite of what we want as leaders. The next real key piece is to, as a team as a whole, how you engage and ask for greater support. So again, you are developing rapport with your team. And in no way as a leader are you going to know everything or have all of the answers. And so the opposite is often true. The more that we can demonstrate vulnerability and elicit support and feedback from our team, the greater that we can move the needle forward in really establishing trust, greater intrinsic motivation, and just higher performance overall, because now they are feeling like they are bought in, they're brought in, they're a part of the decision-making process. And so you can really build this sense of ownership, explaining, what the team is in need of iterating on, what the requirements are to, say, produce, and truly asking them, how do they feel that it could be accomplished? What can the team come up with in terms of how do you take on some of the added responsibility that's being put onto different teams, maybe having to wear several different hats that might even feel like it's outside of their purview. But asking for their contributions gives them a sense of ownership, and in relation to the outcomes and the responsibilities and the things that they're ultimately volunteering to take on. And so we are so much more apt to take on more when we feel like we're needed and that we're listened to and that we're heard and our ideas are valued, as opposed to when we are just demanded and told what to do. So truly, that's one aspect, but also helping them to see the vision, help them to really see the forest through the trees, so to speak. Query them, who are the main stakeholders for the team? Who is the team in service to? Who do they support? Who are they accountable to, both internally and then also externally to the team? And really see if they can kind of formulate a picture of all of the various types of people that they might be in service to and in charge of taking care of. What are the various responsibilities that the team, handles, and who maybe have they even forgotten? And really iterate on this regularly. Have continual discussions on changes in projects, who new stakeholders might be, who's another seat at the table or another chair that needs to be pulled up for the team to take into consideration. And this can be especially beneficial too if there's challenges that are also happening. Not everything is always happy and just smooth going. And so if there's a little bit of conflict even with other stakeholders or business owners or people who are asking more of the team, with this awareness, you can now try to center conversations around how to even approach those topics. And really developing camaraderie and accountability. So when you're engaging the team, think about how you are establishing internally within the team itself the core values, the mission, the vision, the true purpose of the team, and how they fit within the larger organization as a whole. Have them really think about, the different scenarios and how they show up, not only for the projects and the stakeholders, but with each other. How do they show up for each other, support one another, and create a greater sense of accountability? And really think about, as a team, how you can develop ground rules and boundaries and really setting expectations for each other. And so you can do this around, how your team is communicating internally, how you're setting up meetings. Are there days where there's like no meeting days, at least within the team itself? Are there time frames from which you can set expectations on responding to certain messages or ways that you can flag for urgency? This way you're setting up processes and systems within the team that they feel comfortable operating within, and it reduces the amount of ambiguity and thought and decision making that's required. This can truly help them to also be more productive so that they're focusing their time and energy and their efforts on the things that matter most at the appropriate times. And also reduces the amount of friction that can happen within the team if, say, people have different expectations on when someone is going to respond to a message or get back to them or be in support. You may not be able to control, say, the organization as a whole, But the team itself can start to create these expectations internally, and this can help them to have a better sense of understanding, at least with each other. And then truly establishing trust. Without internal trust, teams struggle. And so you really want to continually be engaging your team in regular conversations, setting baselines, understanding where the team is at, surveying happiness, trust, psychological safety, and really creating open and judgment-free forums for deeper and greater conversations, challenges that they're facing as a team and individuals within the team. And so really the third overarching area where you can start to support and help to guide your team through ambiguity, through this uncertainty that some of our industry is facing, is to be that buffer. Be the buffer for the team, but also keep transparency. And this can be really tricky as a leader, because sometimes we are we're trepidatious in how we traverse this, right? We don't know how much to share. We don't know what's fully appropriate, or sometimes when we cross certain boundaries. And so sometimes we either don't share anything at all and just stay fairly removed, or we overshare. And so what we want to think about is how we can protect the team and still be forthright. And so you can share how the team is progressing forward. They don't need to know your opinions on every matter. They don't need to know fully whether you agree or disagree with another leader within the organization or a decision that's being made. But you can express that, hey, this might be a challenge and we're going to get through this together, and you are the support system for them, and then they can lean on you. And so when you're establishing communication lines for the team and individuals, regularly elicit feedback and access pertinent information. So you don't have to be in the weeds. You don't have to be micromanaging in order to get the right information or have it within reach. And this also can make sure that you're establishing that sense of trust for your team. You trust the decisions that they're making. On the flip side, you don't also need to be super distant, right? So you can be present and you can be invested in the morale and the interests of the team and how you truly make yourself available without having to dive into the weeds and be that micromanager that you don't want to be. However, we don't want to be too hands-off, because again, it can send the wrong message that you're disinterested, and they're trying to figure out how do they then get FaceTime with you. And one other piece that I would say is really important, and I think that sometimes we overlook, is just how we speak about our team, how highly we speak about the team, not just the challenges they're facing, not just the status updates, but the things that they've overcome, the things that they've accomplished, and how we speak about that, broadly within the organization, and really focusing on the team as a whole, not just individual superstar performers. This is going to help establish that sense of teamwork and trust, and make it really less about individualism, which is sometimes a very common problem when people are trying to move ahead. They're trying to move up in the organization. They're trying to do things as an individual. There's nothing wrong with having individual recognition, star performers in certain areas, as long as that we, are cognizant of all of the various different strengths that individuals bring. And the more that you can get to know your team and understand what those individual interests and strengths and little things and idiosyncrasies that they only have and possess, you can better align your team together. You can know how to reach out to them in the ways that are most compelling, and how the whole team can move forward collectively. So really thinking about how you can highlight the team's efforts while still honoring the individuals who are within it. Now, some of this may not seem really novel to you or very different, but I do ask, how often are you doing this? Really doing it? Sometimes we already know the answer. Most often we do. It's just a matter of are we doing it? Are we really engaging the team in the way that they need? Are we spending that extra amount of time? Are we finding ways within our own calendar to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for the team? You know, um, it's really a matter of how these little small efforts that we make as a leader, how they add up as a whole. That's how we express our care. It's how they remember us. It's how they know who we are authentically as a leader, and it ripples across the organization. And the highest performing, highest value creating teams are the ones that truly understand how they operate as individuals and as a collective whole. And within the organization, they understand the gaps that each individual fills and the way that they can show up for one another. And truly, they understand the greater purpose that the team has. And so when you're establishing this baseline with your team, you're setting up yourself and the team for navigating these greater complexities and uncertainty and the things that you're facing. You're boldly walking into it together. You're not ignoring it. You're not trying to pretend it doesn't exist. You're not facing it isolated and alone. And I think more often than not, this is what teams crave, and this is what they need in order to feel like they can function and move forward and be successful, even against all the odds, right? And so when they're really able to address fear, to address the fear of the unknown, the anxiety, the pressure, the stress, we're facing so many other neurological issues right now that have to be addressed. But if we together can come forward, it's going to be so much easier. And while we're talking a lot more in companies, right, about mental well-being, mental health, how we support work-life balance, and I said earlier, work-life boundaries, because I think that's more appropriate or apropos to what it is that we're truly facing. The greater that we can start to help mental well-being, right? Happiness comes truly not from money, not from all of the things that sometimes it's perceived as. It comes from the ability to feel like we have a purpose and that we are in concert with other people, that we are in connection with other people. That's what actually drives our neurological state of happiness and fulfillment. And so the more that we can establish those norms within our teams, the greater chance to address all of the other types of little issues or big issues or conflicts that arise within teams, because we're at least setting a foundation and a baseline. Even if you've been dealing with toxicity, you can make shifts and changes incrementally over time to help your teams, help the organization as a whole, and start to move things in a positive direction. You do have the power and the ability to address this and really bring your team together. Developing that sense of camaraderie and purpose is so integral, so crucial for teams right now. And it's going to help leaders know how to traverse this in a greater way. And so I'd love to hear from you. What stands out for you? What pieces do you feel like are helpful for the team so that they know how they're showing up, where they fit in with the organization, what it is that they're doing? Sometimes teams are creating things, but they really don't know the full vision. They can't see the full scope. Maybe it hasn't even fully been shared with them. Help them to see that light so that they know what they're working towards. Giving them that intrinsic motivation is going to be so much more powerful than any amount of fear-based motivation that sometimes organizations feel is more appropriate. So hopefully this helps you to think through, some clear pathways, tangible, actionable things that you can start doing, just little pivots that you can start making in conversations with your team. And if you have any questions for me on how to actually start to implement this, what are some of the tools, techniques, things that you can use to usher in those conversations, then please reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. Those are the things that I truly love helping leaders and teams with accomplishing, so that everyone feels like they're moving forward on a shared mission, a shared purpose, and feeling truly successful in the work that they do and how they spend their time and their lives and their energy. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful, rest of the week. Please reach out in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, what stands out to you, what questions you have, and let's continue the conversation. All right. Talk soon.